Welcome to the fish tank.
Hey everybody, Fishman here. This video is going to be about some of the custom fabrication that I need to do from time to time. A lot of the stuff I do that I've shown in videos lately have been for home use or for my fish room. This is actually going to have a commercial application. This is for a client. This is also part of the river tank build. Now, this is going to be an 1/8 inch groove in this acrylic, so I can put on a sort of a sliding plexiglass door, so I can adjust the amount of flow that's going to go to the surface of the tank. If you remember back to the day in the life of a Fishman, this is the box that I had test fit on that tank at that time before I had glued everything in place. And because everything seemed to work out reasonably well as far as height goes, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to permanently glue everything in place, leave the sliding glass door adjustable, of course, and then I'm going to, well, ever since that video and now, I am going to try out different flow rates, different amounts of deflection, and see what the client likes the most and what works best for the tank. I should clarify, some of the work I do is not necessarily a client request. Usually I'll make a suggestion, like in this particular case. He was perfectly happy with the way the water was flowing in the tank as was, but I wanted some more surface agitation, so I asked him if he would be okay with that, and he thought it would be a great idea. So that's what started this whole process. Like I said, this is a prototype, so it is just there strictly to try things out. And also, because it has an adjustable door on it, it gives me the chance to try different amounts of restriction. I don't want to get too much, because if you have too much restriction on the flow of the pump, you end up with cavitation, and that could easily wear the pump out a lot faster and also make a lot more noise. Sorry about the little bit of algae on the tank at this point. I had to do this on this particular day and I didn't have time to actually clean the glass, but like I said, it had to be done. So this is where it all started, and then over the next little while, like I said, I fiddled around with this and came up with a kind of a flow rate that I thought was good. And then what I needed to do after that is I needed to design something that wasn't so bulky. I mean, like I said, the client didn't mind. He said he liked the flow, and because it's acrylic and it's fairly clear, he thought it was okay, but I tried to do the best I can for them. So that's what led to this. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to make, instead of a large bulky flow box like that, I've worked out some of the math for like the flow rate and what I wanted to get. So what I'm going to do now, instead of doing that, is I am going to make, if you remember the little attachment that went into the outflow of the pump, I'm going to make the entire thing out of that acrylic, and I'm going to machine it so that all you have is just an elbow that goes to the surface and then deflects the water across the front of the top of it. And then it'll be much simpler, much easier to look at, and hopefully hopefully it'll work. That's the other thing. I think I've done enough fiddling with this that I suspect it will be fine, but you never really know. So to get the elbow that I need, I'm going to do the exact same thing I did when I was building those hobs. Is I'm just going to cut a 45 degree and then weld those together and give myself a nice 90. So the unfortunate thing is, because I had to cut the 45 first, it no longer fits into the chuck on my lathe, so I have to build an arbor. And because this arbor needs to have a fair amount of friction to it, I'm actually using ABS here. It is a terrible thing to machine, but the nice thing about it in this particular case is it leaves a really rough finish like this. So now when I put it on, I will have a reasonably good grip. So what I've done here is that whenever I machine these things, you can see, well, you can't really see here, but there is a step to it. The first one is loose, and then it gets tighter and tighter, and then I just, like I said, right here what I'm doing is fiddling with it until I got the one that I like the most, and then I'll adjust the cross slide to that particular cut, and then I'll do a pass, make sure it's all that particular thickness or diameter, I guess I should say, and then we're good to go. So all I have to do then is put that on. It'll be reversed, of course, because I need to machine the end that's going to go and fit into the 1.5" fitting on the tank, and that is the part that needs to be finally done. Now, normally, if I were doing something out of metal or anything else, this is not a strong enough grip, because there is a fair amount of friction involved. But because I'm machining acrylic, and you have to be so gentle with it when you're machining it, because otherwise it just melts, this is perfectly fine. And of course, the lawn guys are going by at this particular moment. Sorry about that. So what I'm going to do here is, like I said, you can tell I'm just doing a light touch. So that's all I'm going to do, and I'm going to continue doing those passes until I have the right diameter. And also, I'm just going to trim up the end as well. This is a very straightforward process. Unfortunately, it's a little lengthy, simply because, like I said, I needed to take my time. Just taking ever so small amounts off at a time, and that way I don't overcome the static friction that's holding it onto the arbor, and then that would just totally mess up the whole piece. So I'm just going to, like I said, nice and light and easy passes. So eventually I end up with this. This is just a piece of 1.5" socket fitting, just so I can get a feel for it. And then what I'm going to do, I also trimmed down the pipe to the right the right length too, just so it doesn't interfere. And then I'm just going to do slight touches until I get the right fitting. And also notice that same as when I was making the arbor, I only do the first little bit, just in case, because when you machine acrylic, you can easily heat it up, and then of course that when it cools down again, it changes in diameter. So I'm very cautious when I machine it, and just a little bit at a time until I finally get the right feel for it, and then I still have enough, like I said, enough friction for it to hold in place. So this was originally a square disc of 1/8 inch, and I just used the belt sander here just to round it out. My original intent for this was to glue this in place. Well, here's most of it done now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to glue that on, and then I was going to let it cure for a day just to make sure it was a solid build, as solid as it could be. And then what I wanted to do is put it in the lathe back on the arbor, because I had made the arbor, so I'm also just use the thing. And then I'll be very gentle with it, and because I'd already sanded most of the material off, I was hoping that it would end up, being secure enough and and work. Well, it doesn't always turn out that way. So here I'm going to glue this on. This part is pretty straightforward. And then next day, actually I think this was a couple days later, because I got kind of busy, I glued it on. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn on the lathe and try and machine that ever so slightly off, just to round it out, make it look nicer. But unfortunately, it is only 1/8 inch acrylic, and it is too fragile. And also because I originally wanted to offset it, I ended up cracking, which is unfortunate. But the nice thing about acrylic, it is easily repairable. So what I'm going to do now is go to plan B, which should have been plan A, and I'm just going to sand down with the belt sander until I get the right shape. And then, like I said, it didn't take long. I have no idea why I originally wanted to put it in the lathe anyway. It does give a much nicer finish, because the tools that I use there, the high-speed steel, is much better at giving it that nice quality look to it. So you can see it is a bit rough here, but when it's in the water, no one's ever going to notice. And then the nice thing, like I said, about acrylic, repairing it is easy. All I need to do is put a little bit of the methylene chloride into the gap, and it just glues the two ends together. And you can just see it seeping in there. The little bit that drips down the side there will actually mar the plastic. You can see a little bit of a drop there, but it's easy to polish that out too later on. So now I'm just going to put the elbow together. This part is the same as I did for all the hobs I made lately, and also for the air power lifts. It's It's very straightforward and easy to do, and it's just a simple matter now of squeezing them together to get that as tight as possible. In this particular case, because it's all going to be underwater, it doesn't need to be watertight, because if a little bit leaks out, that's no big deal. But if you're building this like for a hob, you need to do this, that final squeeze you just saw me do, where you see the plastic kind of oozes out. What happens when you do the welding is it melts both sides, and then you can just, it gives you a chance to take care of any slight imperfections by putting them together. So here you go. This is the final piece of elbow, and I'm going to take the box off. It's been in here, well, I think it's a couple months now. I really should go back and look at that. It has some algae growing on it, but it's easy to clean off. And there you go. I put it on the tank, and somewhere in my math was a little bit of an error as far as the amount of flow I was going to get. This is too intense. So what I'm going to have to do is go back and widen that gap a bit, and then fiddle with it a little bit more just to get the final flow perfectly the way I want it. And then, of course, the client has the last say, of course. This is way too strong, but it really does look nice. And as you can see, the tank is growing up nicely too. Anyway, the nice thing about acrylic and this style is, especially with the belt sander here, is I'll just feed it in through and just sand off that until I get the proper gap I want. So anyway, if you like this style of video, please like and or subscribe, and I will be showing you this again, I suspect in the future, after I get the final amount of flow rate for it. That way it's not splashing too much or making too much noise, so the client doesn't have to run to the washroom all the time. Anyway, I'll get there. So anyway, thanks again for watching. Here it is, the next test gap. Bye for now.